Hello, my name is Matt Reynolds, and my topic is including families of deaf children in transition. A note, whenever I talk about deaf students or deaf children, I'm including deaf, hard of hearing, and any child with a hearing loss within that term. So the problem that we see is that families are not involved in their deaf children's education. From my experience, I can say I had one active family that supported their deaf child in the education and all of their needs. We also see that there isn't enough research in the area of family influence in special education. And then transition services are not meeting the demand of the population. About 50% of deaf students in America are the age 14 to 21. There just aren't enough qualified individuals out there to provide these services for them. Some quick background knowledge. We know that transition is helping youth with disabilities move from one student role to an adult role in society, and that IDEA requires schools to implement transition for these special education students. With these transition services, they need to be modified to reflect the deaf student's need. Deafness is a low incident disability, and it also has its own culture, subgroups, traditions, and language. And typically, deaf children do not have deaf parents. Only about 5% have deaf parents. Others may have hard of hearing parents. It's important for families with a deaf child to become a student support network, as Rowan et al. Calls it. This is where experts and others gather around this student to support them in their transition needs. And we see that this is really important for deaf because they rely more on family than any other disability category for obtaining work. The National Technical Assistance Center on Transition gathered all the research out there, and they've put it into predictors and outcomes related to areas of education, employment, and independent living. 3 of these predictors can directly relate back to the family: parent expectations, parent involvement, and student support. It's interesting to note that parent expectations follow and coordinate with each of these areas. From the Powers and Saskowitz article, we can see that families with deaf children are involved less. The teachers perceived less involvement and more passive involvement compared to hearing parents of hearing students. And so what they mean by passive involvement is observation of the class instead of direct involvement with their child or other students. From the Clune and Corbett article, we can see that with the 5 groups of parents, really only 2 were involved or had an interest in the classroom, those being college educated and with a high school degree. Research suggests 3 approaches to helping families become more involved in their deaf child's education. Powers and Saskowitz suggested using activities for both the parents and their deaf child. These could be school-based, community-based, and importantly, American Sign Language classes to help communication flow between those groups. The second approach is teacher trainings and helping the teachers understand how to best help the parents be more involved. This could be looking at the family's cultural values and making connections there and helping them bring them in. It could be talking about the IEP, how to request an interpreter for deaf students. The third option is using multidisciplinary teams and how to incorporate other organizations to help benefit the family and support them in their students' transition goals. These next 3 slides are all the references that I used to support my paper.